Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Kairis, and I'm grateful to be your worship associate this morning. On behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, I welcome all of you here in our church and also gathering with us online. If you are new to First U and would like to learn more, please check out our website at firstuuwilm.org. First Unitarian Church is a welcoming congregation. We affirm the worth and dignity of all. No matter the hue of your skin or the origin of your ethnicity, welcome whomever you love. Do you find yourself a believer or a non-believer? Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. And now, let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Larry Piers, minister here at First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. It was great to see you coming into this sanctuary this morning. The warmth in the room kept getting warmer and warmer, and the icicles that you gathered on your way here started to disappear right before my very eyes. If you're watching us online, I hope that you are warm, or you can feel the warmth of our worship coming towards you as well. So as we gather this morning on this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, may we be attentive to what the world around us is still calling us to see. May we be open to what we are seeing within and among ourselves. May we recognize that we are in a continual conversation. May we acknowledge that the work of racial justice includes us all, and it is our ongoing work. As one of my meditation teachers, David Trevelyan, has written, as we seek to bring our own selves into alignment with what we care about, we must remember that everything within us and around us, our own bodies, nervous systems, our neighborhoods, our economies, our social services, our national stories and aspirations and challenges are in a continual conversation. When we acknowledge the still open wounds, like the legacies of racism, we can see that we still need healing and transformation. Healing and transformation for individuals and for the larger systems that we are a part of.
If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to join us by lighting it while I read these words adapted by Reverend Scott Taylor. Pulled in many directions by the demands of our days, we light this chalice to remind us of the still point deep inside. Now let us rise in body or in spirit and join together in singing hymn 116, I'm on my way, and the words will also appear on the screen.
I'm on my way, and in freedom land, I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way, thank God, I'm on my way. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I'm on my way, thank God I'm on my way. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I'm on my way, thank God I'm on my way. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. I'm on my way, thank God I'm on my way. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, thank God I'm on my way.
Woo. So let us say together our unison affirmation. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
Let us join now in a time of prayerful meditation. This meditation actually comes from the work of Rhonda McGee, a woman who's dedicated herself to civil rights and legal rights and justice, and is also a meditation teacher. Feel yourself supported in the chair that holds you. Feel the comfort of the earth that your feet touch so gently as the earth touches your own feet in return. Take a deep breath, not changing anything about your breath, but allow yourself to turn inward, resting your attention on the in-breath and the out-breath, following the flow of the in-breath and the out-breath as best as you can. On the in-breath, you might try breathing in on a count of 4. And then hold your breath for a count of 6. And as you breathe out through your mouth at a count of 8. So let's do that again. As you breathe in on a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 6 or so. And breathe out through your mouth at a count of 8. Allow yourself now to center or settle into your natural breathing rhythm, maintaining awareness of just how deeply and fully you are breathing. Rest along the river of the long, broad, and deep now. Call to mind your desire for peace and well-being for yourself and for others and for our world. And on the next in-breath, consciously focus on the love that exists in your heart. As you breathe in, bring greater awareness to that love, its warmth, its softness, or other characteristics unique to your experience of that love that exists in your heart. As much as possible, allow yourself to completely feel the compassion in your being for everyone who is suffering or in need of justice, wherever they are in this moment. So breathing in, sense that love, and hold in your heart those who you care about. Hold in your heart yourself. Hold in your heart our world that's in need of justice and more love and compassion. And as you breathe out, consciously send loving support towards all those you believe to be in need of it in this moment. So let's stay with that practice during this shared silence of breathing in and holding the love in your heart, those you care about, those who need loving, caring attention, justice, or compassion. And as you breathe out, send them that love. Send them what it is that you feel they need in this moment. Let's join now in a shared silence with that practice of holding and sending love. Each week when we gather, we allow ourselves or invite ourselves to speak into this room. Our concern for ourselves, for those we love, or this world that we share. So let's take a moment to name those concerns aloud in this room if you choose to do so, or write in the chat if you'd like to. One concern I have is that the teleprompter is off. Other concerns? And also, this is a time to share our joys with one another. So if you're holding a particular joy, you're invited to share it in this room so it can brighten our own spirits as well. What are the joys that you're holding today that you would like to share? What else? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay. I'm anticipating the joy of the teleprompter coming on. Let's join together in singing Comfort Me. Richard will lead us, and the words will appear on the screen.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort
Our reading today is from The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. Excuse me. America is an old house. We can never declare the work over. Wind, flood, droughts, and human upheavals batter a structure that is fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in the original foundation. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go in the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away. Whatever is lurking will fester, whether you choose to look or not. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. Whatever you are wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. We in the developed world are like homeowners who inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable, loam and rock, heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, centuries even. We are the heirs to whatever is right and wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or the joists, but they are ours to deal with right now. Any further deterioration is, in fact, on our hands.
Thank you, Jackie. This house that Isabel Wilkerson talks about as her metaphor for America describes so pointedly this country's founding architecture and its uneven relationship in responding to racism. We've inherited this old house, America, with all of its beauty and its flaws, all of its charm and its need for attention. It's not our neighbor's house. It's our house. It's not a rental house. We are responsible for the upkeep of this house, and we can never declare that the work is over. It's not a vacation home that we visit now and then. It is the house where we live day to day. We've come so accustomed to it that we don't always see or respond to what needs attention. The floorboards creak under our feet. The plaster is crumbling before our eyes. The windows stick sometimes. The basement is often kept out of view with things we'd rather not see or check upon. Sure, we can have all kinds of dispositions about the shape of this house, America. We can have multiple opinions about who's responsible for this house that we are in. But the fact of the matter is, as Isabel Wilkerson declares, we are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with right now. And any further deterioration is in fact in our hands. The uneven pillars are a fact. The foundation of this house points to a troublesome history. For as Wilkerson says, we've inherited, and I quote, a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable, loam and rock heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, centuries even. Indeed, when we really dare to consider it, it was centuries ago that the foundation of this house, America, was established. There's no healing from racial justice until it is acknowledged. The painful and shameful as it is, the architecture of this house that we've been unraveling from since its beginning, when the European colonizers could not do all the hard work and labor needed to clear the land, plant and build with the indentured European servants that they brought over. They turned then to indigenous people. And when the indigenous people became so susceptible to the diseases of the Europeans colonizers went to Africa. Enslaved Africans were first brought to this country in 1619, a little over 400 years ago, which really doesn't seem that long ago in some ways. Those enslaved Africans were not freed, so to speak, until 1865. Think about it. That's almost 250 years that most of the enslaved African people in this country had their human dignity and worth denied, their rights extinguished, their own agency removed. That's 2.5 centuries of enslavement. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the foundation of our house that we call America. Yes, as Wilkerson puts it, soil is unstable, loam and rock heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, even centuries. Then, in 1865, after those almost 250 years of enslavement and an economy built on enslavement, in 1865, those Africans were freed. This was a freedom that actually required consistent enforcement by federal troops sent to the South from 1865 until 1877. It was during that brief time, those 12 years that we call the Reconstruction, that formerly enslaved Africans built their own homes, planted their own gardens and crops, gathered in their own schools and farms and businesses. African Americans were elected to office during those 12 years. And then, when the federal troops left in 1877, businesses owned by African Americans were burned down. A series of black code laws to limit the freedom of these African American people were passed in the South. These black code laws became what we call the Jim Crow laws that were in place until 1964. That's almost 100 years after emancipation. Let that sink in for a moment. It was during this time of enslavement that in order to justify the brutal treatment of enslaved Africans, that they were assigned a, quote, black racial identity and considered inferior, less than human. This socially constructed inferiority was upheld by laws and structures that normalized their suffering and their mistreatment. Over time, a caste system was reinforced in this country that put non-blacks as better than others and gave them a white identity constructed and reconstructed over time. A folklore about so-called white supremacy was then established, a narrative that was often unconscious and unquestioned. It became the blueprint for this house, which we call America. With the rise of the civil rights movement, some of the cracks in the house were exposed and attended to. There were a series of protests and retaliations on protesters through coalitions and alliances across identities and backgrounds. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were passed. One of those leaders, as we know, who we're celebrating this weekend, was Martin Luther King Jr. He helped to focus the country on the legacy of enslavement and of the Jim Crow laws, and to overturn them through policies and structural efforts through nonviolent resistance, as his teacher Gandhi had taught him and his Christian social gospel had motivated him. King worked at many levels with many women and men to draw attention to the impact of racism and the folklore of white supremacy. He invited everyone, no matter what race they identified, into a possibility of a world without racism that impacted all. The immediate leverage that these civil rights advocates were able to achieve was legislation in order to begin the process of change toward racial justice. King declared this, and I'll quote, "It may be true that you can't legislate integration, but you can legislate desegregation. It may be true that morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. It may be true that the law can't make a man love me, but it can restrain him from lynching me." And I think that's pretty important also. So while the law may not change the hearts of men, it does change the habits of men. And when you change the habits of men, pretty soon the attitudes and the hearts will be changed. And so there is a need for strong legislation constantly to grapple with the problems we face. Progress has been made. I understand in the 1960s, more than 70% of African Americans lived below the poverty line, and that today the percentage is closer to 30%. Yet, as we know, inequities still persist, and efforts to abandon the Voting Rights Act and to impede or to erode some of the equal opportunities of African Americans have still held sway, haven't they? Perhaps Martin Luther King Jr. was both practical and idealistic to imagine that legislation alone could change the habits of people and eventually their attitudes. We know, however, that all the laws and policies in the world will not in and of itself heal us from all the reverberating impact and the long legacy of racism and the folklore of white supremacy in this country. We have to come to understand that the work of racial healing is outward through laws and policies, but it's also inward through personal and interpersonal work that question and defy the hold that racism has had and still has in this country in insidious ways. A contemporary rap group called the Blue Scholars includes this lyric in one of their songs. And they say desegregation was a big step forward, but integration only covered up a rotten core. The surface might have changed, but the cauldron is still hot. Now we more politically correct with less real talk. We are faced with the real talk that we need about racism. We now have the possibility of real practices to engage in order to heal collectively, culturally, and personally from the legacy of racism in this country, a legacy built into the foundation of this house we call America. As Unitarian Universalists, racial justice work is not just political work or just social justice work only. In our guiding principles and in our history, again and again, we have called ourselves to see the interconnectedness of the political and the personal, the necessary interrelationship between social justice and spirituality. Ours is a faith that calls us into the midst of the co-creation of this world ever again, of the eradication of all that limits the human spirit and of a this world heaven, all that limits a this world heaven. For as we remind each other in this song, here on the paths of every day, here on the common human way, is all the stuff the gods would take to build a heaven, to mold and make new Edens, ours the task sublime to build eternity in time. We need this kind of integral vision in our efforts for racial justice. We're not served in this human and sacred task by compartmentalizing ourselves or our work. We need a vision that incorporates changes and healing in the institutional, the interpersonal, the personal, and the embodied trauma. All of these together, not just some of these. To realize our vision of racial justice is not going to happen only by changing some laws, implementing some policies, though that is one manifestation and demonstration of the inner work that we do. To realize that our vision of racial justice is not going to happen only by changing our understanding of racism. To realize our vision of racial justice is not going to happen only by each of us dealing with our own internal oppression or by confronting our own unconscious biases. All of these, each of these is important, but none of these alone is sufficient. Do you understand what I'm saying here? More critically, we are beginning to understand more and more that race-related trauma embedded in our bodies is generational and impacts people of different identities differently. As Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, racism is a visceral experience that dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscles. Resmaa Menakem, an African-American somatic psychotherapist and consultant, gives us a gripping example of this from his own life. He writes, "When I was a boy, I used to watch television with my grandmother. I'd sit in the middle of the sofa and she would stretch out over two seats, resting her legs on my lap. She often felt pain in her hands and she'd ask me to rub them in mine. And when I did, her fingers would relax and she'd smile. And sometimes she'd start to hum melodically and her voice would make a vibration that reminded me of a cat's purr. She wasn't a large woman, but her hands were surprisingly stout with broad fingers and thick pads below each thumb. One day I asked her, 'Grandma, why are your hands like that? They ain't the same as mine.' My grandmother turned from the television and looked at me. 'Boy,' she said slowly, 'that's from picking cotton. They've been that way since long before I was your age. I started working in the fields sharecropping when I was 4. I didn't understand. I'd helped plant things in the garden a few times, but my own hands were bony and my fingers narrow. I held up my hands next to hers and stared at the difference.' She said. 'The cotton plant has pointed burrs in it. When you reach your hand in, the burrs rip it up. When I first started picking, my hands were all torn and bloody. When I got older, they got thicker and thicker until I could reach in and pull out the cotton without bleeding.'" In Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, we're invited into this deeper work of understanding that the work of racial justice certainly includes the institutional and the legislative changes that we can bring about, that racial justice certainly includes the interpersonal work and understanding the varied experiences of people of different racial identities in this country and finding ways to connect and work together in meaningful and liberatory ways. That racial justice certainly includes the personal work that any one of us can do to recognize our unconscious biases or to heal our internalized oppression or become more mindful in our recognition of the subtle and not so subtle impact on racism on all of us. What Menakem and others are helping us to understand is the way that the very houses of our own bodies can hold racial-related trauma that we may not have realized or been conscious of across generations. Individually, whether we have nominally white-identified bodies or nominally black-identified bodies, we have individual and collective healing to do. Menakem says what we call the racial divide is not an obstacle to be conquered. It is a wound that lives inside our bodies, a wound that we can heal. And his book provides insights and somatic practices that can facilitate that healing. So what I'm sketching out in this conversation with you today is that our work for racial justice most certainly includes structural and legislative changes. And the work towards racial justice in our time has also expanded and deepened in recent years beyond some of the initial personal and interpersonal work that many of us have come to know in earlier decades. As Menachem writes, recent studies and discoveries increasingly point out that we heal primarily in and through the body, not just through the rational brain. We can all create more room and more opportunities for growth in our nervous systems, but we do this primarily through what our bodies experience and do, not through what we think or realize or cognitively figure out. So I believe that we need this more integral vision of racial justice. It requires inner and outer work. In recent decades, we have also come to see the collective and the spiritual power of those who have endured and transmuted the impact of racism on themselves. We've come to recognize more and more that the dignity, the resiliency, the artistry, and the spiritual power of the Black identified community is also a testimony and a resource to the whole human community. Together, we can engage in this integral path of racial justice and learn from these personal, collective, and spiritual testimonies. Oftentimes, African Americans and other marginalized in this country have shown us that they have made a way out of no way. So we've got a lot to explore and a lot to talk about together. Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Amen.
On this Martin Luther King Day weekend, we may feel a gentle challenge and then be inspired to take actions that help repair and or heal what is broken in our world. Here are some upcoming events. Today, there is a newcomer's welcome. It is after this service at 12 p.m. in the parish hall. All are welcome. There are many wonderful opportunities. Tomorrow evening, Monday, January 16th, there will be a movie screening of the film Who We Are, a chronicle of racism in America. This film will be shown here at our church tomorrow. Doors open at 6 p.m. for pizza and beverages. The screening begins promptly at 6:30. This church and the wonderful people of the congregation both support and lead us. Here we can place our attention and our actions towards the well-being of our community and our earth. Another way to live out your values is with a financial donation, as your budget allows. Our church and our community needs us to continue sharing our time, talents, and treasure. During the upcoming music, there will be a slide describing the various ways to make a contribution to our church. And now, prior to the music, if you would please join me in dedicating our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings.
Lord, I keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Ain't got time to die, 'cause when I'm healing the sick, when I'm healing the sick, when I'm healing the sick, I'm praising my Jesus. Ain't got time to die, 'cause it takes all of my time to praise my Jesus, all of my time to praise my Lord. If I don't praise him, the rock's gonna cry out, glory and honor, glory and honor. Ain't got time to die. Lord, I keep so busy working for the kingdom. Keep so busy working for the kingdom. Keep so busy working for the kingdom. Ain't got time to die, 'cause when I'm feeding the poor, when I'm feeding the poor, when I'm feeding the poor, I'm working for the kingdom. Ain't got time to die, 'cause it takes all of my time to praise my Jesus, all of my time to praise my Lord. If I don't praise him, the rock's gonna cry out, glory and honor, glory and honor. Ain't Lord, I keep so busy serving my master, so busy serving my master. Keep so busy serving my master. Ain't got time to die, 'cause when I'm giving my all, when I'm giving my all, when I'm giving my all, I'm serving my master. Ain't got time to die, 'cause it takes all of my time to praise my Jesus, all of my time to praise my Lord. If I don't praise him, the rock's gonna cry out, glory and honor, glory and honor. Ain't got time to die. Now won't you get out of my way, let me praise my Jesus. Out of my way, let me praise my Lord. If I don't praise him, the rock's gonna cry out, glory and honor, glory and honor. Ain't got time to die.
Thank you, Richard and Kathy. Reverend Larry will extinguish our chalice as I read these words adapted by author Valerie Brown. Hope is our capacity to see things as they are and to believe that our actions matter, even if we don't know and can't know the outcome. We can be guided by what we care about and what matters most to us, and what we can do to support healing within ourselves and in our beautiful and broken world. Please join us. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please join us. Following the benediction, we invite you to greet your neighbor, say hello to one another. We'll also sing our closing hymn, which is 1017. The words will appear on the screen following the benediction. We'll sing that song, greet each other, and those of you who are here for the newcomers gathering will meet by noon in the parish hall. We have some coffee and tea for everybody as well. So these words were written by Martin Luther King, Jr. When our days become dreary with low, hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. So may it be. Let's sing together, building a new way.